Are your bowls small? I'll show you how to make big ones. That's next on Sprague Woodturning. Hello and welcome to this week's video. Before we get into this too deep, I'm going to stick some bloopers at the end. Let me know if you if you like them or not. I I know it may seem that I'm very smooth on camera. Trust me, I'm pretty much the opposite of it. So it takes me a lot of takes when I'm talking to the camera to get things right. So anyway, if things go wrong in the workshop, which they always seem to, I'll put some bloopers at the end. So on to this week's video. Um, this is some cherry burl, and as you see in the opening, it's not a very large piece, at least not a piece that I consider to be very large. And what I want to do is combine this with resin and add the value to it. And it's just one way to kind of maximize your profits for wood turners out there that are wondering if it's worthwhile doing resin or not. So I'm just trimming this piece up with the David Ellsworth gouge, the 5/8 bowl gouge, and just trying to clean off all the anchor seal because that's how this piece was dried. And this is kiln dried, by the way. And then, of course, the anchor seal was put on it just to prevent it from cracking. But it's important to get all that anchor seal off before we do any resin casting. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by to check out my channel and my videos. If you're not familiar, I give away bowls every 5,000 subscribers. So we just gave away the 35,000 subscriber giveaway bowl, and hopefully we'll be able to do a 40,000 in the next month or so. So if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that. I would really appreciate it. So this cherry burl was actually fairly solid. It did have some issues when it was drying, and so it started to develop some cracks. So I poured some thin CA glue from Starbond in there to keep those cracks from migrating any further than they were. And if you're not doing that, you probably really should. You'd be surprised at how well the CA glue will work on keeping those cracks from migrating. Anyway, we're just trimming this piece down, getting rid of all that anchor seal, and I think I end up with probably about a 1 inch wall thickness. Now, where I poured in the CA glue, uh, and then I hit it with the accelerator, there was some foaming. So that's kind of what I was trying to pick it out of there with that little pick tool. But this little Typhoon bit does a real good job cleaning up all those areas. And again, all these tools that I use, there is a link in the description below, either Amazon links or links to other websites where you can get these all the things you see in the videos. And just clean off the bark area here, but I wasn't happy with the results I was getting. I don't even know where I got this flap sander from. To be quite honest with you, I didn't get it from sandpaper.ca because they don't sell them. Anyway, it's kind of an extra step you should maybe take before doing resin casting, just to make sure that the bark has good adhesion with the resin. Using the Stoner mold release, and so as you can see, I've got these two plastic bowls, and the idea is here I want to sandwich the blank between the two of them and then pour the resin. Going to be using the deep cast this week. I'm a little gun shy from the lemon glitter and walnut platter that I tried to do last week. So, and if you missed that last week, I mixed the resin improperly, and I've had all kinds of issues with it. So, I certainly will be paying a lot better attention to what I'm doing in the future. I still have hopes of saving that piece, and I am filming a video on it. So hopefully we'll be able to save that piece and it'll be an upcoming video. And again, when you're mixing this resin, it's so important to scrape the sidewalls and the bottom of the bucket, all of that to get it mixed up properly. Rainbow blue is one of the colors that I'm going to use here. Another fan favorite. I really like rainbow blue as well. It's just a really intense deep blue. Switch to the mechanical mixer here. again, every time you do this, you're going to put air in the resin, so just keep that in the back of your mind. And I want it to use lilac purple. That was the other color that I was really, the two of them combined really should look quite nice. So the idea here was to pour the resin from each side and kind of keep them separate. But of course, this is just the end of the pour because I forgot to turn the camera on. Just, yeah. Anyway, then I just took a tongue depressor, mixing stick, and just kind of swirled it around where the two of them, where I figured the two of them would meet, just to combine them a little bit. I was very surprised when it came out of the pressure pot, though, and we'll see that here in a minute.
Okay, so here we are in the pressure pot. The manufacturer recommends 72 hours before demolding, so that's what we'll do. Well, isn't that neat? I don't know what to say about that. So strange. There's a witness line there, but this was all done in one pour. Very cool. Wow. All right, well, let's get a glue block on it and get it mounted on the lathe. All right, so it's been pretty cold here in Eastern Ontario, and that's where the temperature's at inside the shop. Stove's been on for about an hour now. I've got the blank mounted on the lathe, ready to clean the foot off, and we'll get a glue block on it.
So just cleaning off the base here, starting with the Hercules. Again, it's very important to get rid of all that resin. I don't really like to stick these glue blocks to resin. I prefer to stick them to wood. And that is the number one tapered straight tool from Hunter Tools. And we will actually see that more in an upcoming video. But I just wanted to give it a try here. It's the first time that I've actually used it. And it's actually it's probably mostly used for end grain turning, but most of these burls are pretty much end grain, so that makes tools like this a good choice for this kind of work. So I get a lot of questions about the hot melt glue method that I use right here, and I'm just using any old cheap glue. Now, the cheapest stuff that I've been able to find here in Canada is at Canadian Tire. And so you can buy it in pretty big packs for 20 bucks. And, you know, I think that for the value, it's probably the best that I've found around. Now, a lot of people have tried this method and it didn't work. And I think the reason why it didn't work is because they used a glue gun. A glue gun cannot give you enough volume um, before you stick the glue block on the bottom of the bowl. So, some of it may be starting to set up before you put it on the bottom, and then the bowl comes off of your glue block, and then, you have a bad day. So I melt mine in an electric frying pan, and I make sure that there's lots of material on there before I stick it on the bottom of the bowl. You can see how much squeezes out. So, I'm a firm believer in this method, and this method was taught to me years ago by by a professional wood turner in the province of New Brunswick. Anyway, I've used it for over 20 years, and I rarely lose a bowl off the lathe. I can't say the same thing about a chuck. So that's why I use this method. And by using this method, you can actually, the shiny finishes that I like to use, you can put multiple coats on, and you're never going to actually put your hands on the bowl because you hold it by the glue block. So I thought I would leave this clip in here at real time. A lot of people don't have a sense of how slow I'm actually going because I speed the footage up when when I'm doing these videos. If I didn't, these videos would be hours long. But I mean, that there shows you how slow I'm actually going with the Hercules. And, and it doesn't matter if you're using the Hercules or using a gouge. When you're turning resin, you've got to go really slow, or else you're going to end up with massive amounts of tear out and chip out. So, slow and steady wins the race here. Just even pressure. And if you're patient, you will be left with a really nice surface that should be ready for sanding. Right, so onto the rim here. One of the reasons why I've muted the videos is because you can see the resin is an issue. It flies everywhere, and it it's almost staticky if you follow me. So it's very hard to keep off the camera. So uh, when I was shooting these videos before, I would leave the dust collector off, and I was having all kinds of issues with just resin bits being all over the lens on the camera. So I want to use dust collection to certainly keep the camera cleaner so that you guys have a better visual on this as well. And of course, with the dust collection on and the footage sped up, it actually creates a loud, whiny, pitchy noise. So that's why I'm shooting these videos now, and I think that I like it a lot better. And anyway, tell me your thoughts on it. Measuring wall thickness is so important. That way you don't go through the bottom of your bowl. I tend to leave these resin pieces thicker than, say, normal bowls. And the reason for that is, I want to make sure that the resin has a good surface area to adhere to. And I can't help but think that if you make these too thin, that they're probably going to fail on you over time. And, the resin can be quite brittle. And if you happen to get some vibration or a catch, then that's probably going to be the end of it. So that's why I tend to leave a lot of these resin pieces thicker than, say, a normal bowl would be. So here I'm just working on thickness. It's still quite thick at this stage. And, again, patience is the key here. You've just got to be patient. Uh, with just normal wooden pieces, you can certainly take bigger bites out of it than you can with pieces that have resin in them. But if it's got resin, you've got to really take it oh so slow and be patient. The very last thing here is just to use a freshly sharpened gouge, just to and use it like a scraper on the very base and on the rim and on any of the resin, and it leaves a really nice surface. 3.5 inch dimple disc from sandpaper.ca. I sanded this piece from 60 to 800. There was actually no need for any filling with any CA glue on this piece either. I've covered this in the past, but I'll cover it again. So when I first start, the lathe is forward, the drill is in reverse. The next grit, the lathe will be in reverse and the drill will be forward. And I keep going back and forth through each grit until we get to 800. and usually left a pretty darn good surface. Ready for buffing, which is what you'll see right here. And that's the Triple E from the Be All buffing system. And that's the last little step to take any of those fine little scratches out prior to putting finish on. Denatured alcohol to clean the surface, so important. And it doesn't matter what finish you're using. If you do any buffing prior to putting any finishes on, make sure you use some denatured alcohol to remove any of that leftover residue.
All right, this is the first coat of Waterlux. We haven't really put this on a resin piece like this yet, so this will be kind of its last little test to make sure that it's going to be suitable for us in the future here. There's our first real look at that. And that is just so cool how the purple and the blue tinted resin has separated. I can't explain that. Burl is awesome. It's a beautiful piece. All right, well that's it. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
And it is the next day here. And again, we're using the Triple E buffing compound. I decided to use the Triple E over 4-0 steel wool on this one. The 4-0 steel wool, I find sometimes can be really aggressive, and it can actually put more scratches in the resin than using the buffing system. So there's some people that have been curious as to why I buff, and that's why. With that said, I typically use 4-0 steel wool on just normal plain Jane bowls, if you will, and not these kind of high-end resin pieces.
All right, so this is the second coat of Waterlux. The resin looked really good, but the burl, of course, it still needs a coat or two. Pearl in there is awesome. And it's really cool how there's like two layers that are kind of mixed together, which kind of shows you that it's not a double pour. Very cool. I will say that this Waterlux, it covers very, very nicely. Might get away with two coats on this. If not, I'll do the third one the same way. And we will see you when we're doing the bottoms.
I think that I probably could have got away with 2 coats, but I did put a third one on. Here I'm using the 3/16 parting tool from Crown, and I'll briefly show it, but you know, I leave probably about an inch to an inch and a half on the very bottom, and that's usually more than enough to hold that bowl in place until you can cut it off. Using the vacuum chuck here again, like I always do to do the bottoms, unless I have a bowl that's just really too large to put it on there. But to be honest with you, I haven't really encountered that. Maybe a couple times, but for the most part, between this chuck and the homemade chuck that I made that I showed last week, it will do the job on pretty much most of the turnings that I do. And I typically sand from 180 to 320 on the base of these bowls unless it has resin. That's a spear point tool from Richard Raffin, just putting a little bit of detail on the very base of the bowl, just to jazz it up a bit. So I don't know how I did it, but I managed to put a tiny little scratch in the resin. It wasn't deep enough that it required any sanding. It just buffed away easily enough here with the Triple E. So that's why the base of the bowl and the outside of the bowl got another coat of finish. All right, so that's it for the video. Let's finish this up and have a chat about this week's project.
All right, it's too cold out here for fancy wood turning smock this week. All right, let's have a look at this beautiful bowl. I am just over the moon with this. This is one of the nicest bowls that I've done on the channel so far. Absolutely beautiful. Of course, with the resin separating the way that it is, as Bob Ross would say, it's a happy little accident. At first, I thought that the blue pigment must be a lot heavier than the purple, so I contacted Designer Epoxy and they said no, they are not. They're the same weight. So, don't really understand how this cool effect happened. Regardless, it did, and I am happy about it. And that cherry burl, well, it ain't bad either. There's the very base. The great thing about the water lux, which I actually only put on 5 hours ago, so I'm actually, you know, it feels good. I could tell that it's not set, but after 5 hours, you can certainly handle it. Anyway, it'll probably only take another coat on the base, and then it will be ready to go. And speaking of that, this is for sale along with the butternut bowl from last week. If you're curious, just send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and we will work out the details and get them mailed out to you. Absolutely fantastic. Piece ended up being 10.5 by 4 high, and we've easily tripled the value on this bowl compared to what it was before. And that's the benefit of resin. I mean, you can work with smaller pieces and make big pieces, big elaborate pieces. So if you're thinking about doing resin casting, you know, there's a good example of why you should. All right, well, that's it. Don't forget about our sponsors in the description down below if you need any stuff. Again, with Designer Epoxy, it's just Inlay Gem is all we're going for now. And apparently, the sandpaper.ca Inlay Gem code is case sensitive. So don't put it in capitals, put it all in lowercase letters. And I've had a couple of people contact me and say that they had issues with that. So lowercase for Inlay Gem for sandpaper.ca. All right, well, that's it. Don't forget to leave a comment. Again, that's where we're going to get the winner of the next 40,000 subscriber giveaway bowl. We're going to pick from the comments, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. All right, well, that's it. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do next week. I do want to do a video, rescue video, hopefully, on the walnut platter with the lemon glitter, where I screwed up the mix on it. So anyway, it's in the kiln and it's weeping resin, but it has slowed down substantially. And so I'm hoping I'm going to be able to maybe shoot that video next week, but I don't know. If not, well, come on back. We'll be something cool here, hopefully. All right, well, that's it. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget that bell. We'll see you next week. It's time to think big with small bowls. It's time to think big with small bowls. That's next on Sprague Woodturning. If you have small bowls, I'll show you how to make big ones. That's next on Sprague Woodturning. It's time to think big with small bowls. It's time to think big with small bowls. It's time to think big with small bowls. That's next on Sprague Woodturning. Are your bowls too small? Let's make them bigger on Sprague Woodturning. If your bowls are small, I'll show you how to make big ones on Sprague Woodturning.